This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
You mean you actually want to make abortion illegal? The shocking answer to this question posed by Bill Kristol today on Right to Life Radio. John Girardi here with you, as always, joined by Jonathan Keller, the CEO of California Family Council. Good to have you here with us, Jonathan.
It's always good to be here, John.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about Bill Kristol. Now, I don't believe we've ever talked about Bill Kristol on this fine program, have we, Jonathan?
I don't think so. I mean, probably not even 5 years ago, because that was before you were at Right to Life of Central California.
Well, no. I was there. I got there in 2016.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It was right
Anyway.
before the election.
All
I
right.
forgot.
So Bill Kristol, you might be asking who that could be. All right. Bill Kristol has been a kind of bigwig in conservative opinion publishing, talking head circles for decades. Since the 90s. I would assume going back to the 90s, as Jonathan looks up his Wikipedia. And he was one of the chief editors for the Weekly Standard.
He was the chief of staff, John, to Vice President Dan Quayle from 1989 to 1993.
Okay, so he was
a fairly big wig. I mean,
yeah, well, for the vice president, the vice presidency, which is worth, as one former vice president said, worth a bucket of spit. So, he was a bigwig in conservative publishing. He was an editor and columnist for the Weekly Standard for years and years and years before it collapsed only a couple of years ago. Sometimes known as the Weekly Standard, W-E-A-K-L-Y, as well as the W-E-E-K-L-Y. And he was a talking head on Fox News, on CNN, on all these different channels, and was sort of, if you look up neocon in the dictionary, the first person that people would mention would be, after George W. Bush, after like Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Bill Kristol would be right in that top five of most cited as an example of a neocons. I would assume. And by neocons, we mean this sort of branch of conservatism that was very intense about foreign policy and led to such decisions as the war in Iraq. So Kristol was was very much in that neocon school and was always kind of I think different people affiliate themselves with political parties for different reasons. I think there are very few people who are like, I 100% love 100% of the things in the Republican Party platform, and I'm 100% in for all 100% of the reasons. No, you affiliate with a party generally because you have a couple of issues that you really care about, and that party represents those issues well. And because unfortunately right now, in the American political system, the only sort of, with all due respect to people who are in Democrats for life, and they do great work, and I love them and support them and encourage them, the Republican Party is the only major political party that's really carrying the torch for the pro-life cause in any way, shape, or form. So a lot of pro-lifers have sort of glommed onto the Republican Party as kind of a default. And I think that the Republican Party has for decades benefited off the votes of pro-lifers without really delivering the results for pro-lifers. And Bill Kristol is kind of a classic example of someone who takes that for granted. Now, Kristol has sort of abandoned whatever pretense he may have had to be conservative over the last 4 or 5 years. He really reacted negatively against President Trump and his candidacy for president in 2016 and 2020. He disliked President Trump to such an extent that he, for someone who is allegedly conservative, even allegedly fiscally conservative, was supporting all kinds of very liberal spending bills, like President Biden's Build Back Better bill and stuff. Why? How could someone have in any way, shape, or form been purportedly fiscally conservative and support that? I'll never know without saying anything one way or another about fiscal conservative policy. Anyway. He has come out in negative reaction to the Republican Study Committee, I believe is the name of it, which is basically it's a group of members of the House of Representatives who gather together. They're sort of like-minded, more conservative-leaning members of the Republican caucus who have proposed various policy priorities in the event that Republicans take the House in 2022. And
the Senate, I should say.
And the
House
Senate.
and the Senate.
Yes, the House and the Senate. And Kristol is negatively reacting to point number 9. So here's what Bill Kristol has to say.
Well, hold on. Before you read that, you should read what point number 9 is, because I was actually kind of impressed with how relatively informal, but in a good way, to see how basically it's an informal setting of the pro-life message, but it was kind of, if you're looking for a way to kind of do the
it's very light on actual policy recommendations.
Yes. It's just more of a tone.
It's not even So let me read this so you get the feel of this. So this is the Republican Study Commission, which is sort of the coalition of the more conservative members of Congress among the Republican Party. And they have this to say about sort of what they want to do, their 11-point plan to rescue America in the event that Republicans take over Congress. Point 9. It says, men are men, women are women, and unborn babies are babies. We believe in science. Men and women are biologically different. Male and female, he created them. Modern technology has confirmed that abortion takes a human life. Facts are facts. The earth is round. The sun is hot. There are 2 genders. And abortion stops a beating heart. To say otherwise is to deny science. Now, this is kind of a rhetorical thing. This is it's an argumentative thing. It's a polemical thing. It's not really like a policy prescription in any way, shape, or form. There's nothing specific that's being, recommended here. There's no bill or law that's being proposed here. Nonetheless, in that section, and then even when they go into more depth, they do not say anything about proposing any law to outlaw abortion or anything. It's they said they want to support the idea of all government policies will favor having more babies adopted, not aborted. But there's nothing else about any kind of specific proposal to limit abortion in this thing.
The closest they get to it there is it says, whether you believe in God or not, as a civilized people who accept science, we must protect babies born and unborn from all acts of violence. So that's a good statement.
Sure.
And that could certainly be interpreted to say, hey, we should have some sort of a federal regulation, a federal law.
Well, I don't know there. I mean, it's saying we should.
Yes.
But whether that should be done via state law, via federal law, whatever. Kristol responds to this very anodyne, non-specific affirmation of pro-life principles, which, by the way, a huge percentage of the Republican base agrees with, by saying, in NRSC Chair Senator Rick Scott's 11-point plan for a Republican Congress, point number 9 asserts, quote, unborn babies are babies, and, quote, abortion takes a human life. This surely implies a federal law banning abortion. GOP and House and Senate candidates, are you for this? With the implication from his tweet being, this is obviously ridiculous. Now, first of all, I don't think it implies a federal law banning abortion. I wish it did. Yep. I wish you could. I'm sure that these are weak-kneed Republicans who are like, well, maybe states should all introduce their own laws to limit abortion, and God forbid we use federal power. And here's the thing. Not only first of all, I wish this thing had a federal abortion ban, and every Republican should be in favor of a federal abortion ban, and the vast majority of Republican voters would 100% support them in trying to institute a federal abortion ban. Like, Kristol, I think, had said in the 90s that he was pro-life.
John,
I think
it gets better, because as you were looking at this, I said, is there any sort of confirmation other than maybe one statement that he's pro-life?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I don't think he has discussed the abortion issue probably in 30 years.
Well, so it says here, the first reply here on the tweet is from our friends at lifenews.com, and it says, quote, "I am pro-life and I intend to remain pro-life. William Kristol, 1992. Okay, so yeah, that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But then I was looking on his Wikipedia page, John, and I was wondering, like, oh, what's, background? I'm like,
By the way, we're spending all this time on Bill Kristol because he is reflective of a whole sort of culture of these kind of elite thought leaders among the Republican Party. He's not just some isolated dude that we're ripping on.
So I went back and I looked, and I see, Bill Kristol was on the executive committee of this organization. Some of the other people that were on either the executive committee or the advisory committee included people like Helen Alvarez, very pro-life individual, Betsy DeVos, Patricia Heaton, let's see here, Ben Stein, all these different people that are Ed Whelan, Charmaine Yost. I mean, it's kind of a who's who of a lot of long-term pro-life individuals.
And this was for
Susan B. Anthony list.
So Bill Kristol was on the board of Susan B. Anthony list, and he's like, oh, man, you'd have to be crazy to want to have a national ban on abortion.
I mean, I know that I literally was involved in trying to use this as a litmus test to help elect more pro-life Republicans across the country.
Right.
But
yeah, and that's the thing is, I've said this a lot about politicians more generally. I think a lot of people get into politics without really well-formulated views about political philosophy or their sort of fundamental beliefs or things like that. I think a lot of people, especially in local government seats, I think you see this. A lot of people get elected to, city councils or whatnot because, well, I've been a successful local whatever, businessman, lawyer, attorney, whatever, doctor. And some people in local political circles said, hey, you should run for something. And I kind of care about a few things, but I don't really have a really well-formulated political viewpoint. And because I live in Clovis, I run as a Republican because that's the path of least resistance. If I lived in, I don't know, Massachusetts somewhere, I would run as a Democrat because that's the in thing to do. They don't have really well-formulated viewpoints, and they don't really care about social issues, especially. It's just not what drives and animates them in the way that, Jonathan and I think the chief reason we're involved in politics, safe to say, is the abortion issue.
Yes.
I think probably above anything else, any other single thing.
And we'd be willing, I think it'd be fair to say, John, that I would be willing to compromise or at least make concessions on a lot of other issues. If you tell me you're going to ban abortion, if you tell me that you're going to increase adoption, yada, 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 all these, in fact, all these different policies that are listed here in Rick Scott's plan, I'd be willing to swallow not everything of these 9 points am I jumping up and down about, but okay, as a package deal.
Yeah, if we had to increase federal income tax rates substantially, but it meant that we could outlaw all abortion, I'm all for it. Screw it. It's worth it to me. And guys like Kristol, who have had way too much power and influence and authority within Republican circles for so many years, for decades, I think they're the reverse. I think they would, and indeed in his case, he has, pitched overboard the pro-life plank of the Republican Party in favor of other stuff. We'll discuss this a little bit more after the break. This is Right to Life Radio on Power Talk. Anyway, Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much. All right, Jonathan, just a quick thing. I think as we're discussing Bill Kristol and his shock that members of the Congress might want to outlaw abortion, actually, this thing that's been a part of the Republican Party platform since shortly after Roe v. Wade. I think one of the things that's implicit in it is this idea of, you want to pass a federal abortion law, a federal law to outlaw abortion?
John, I also have to point out, you look at the rest of this plan, and it's really kind of amazing to me because the plans that they put out here,
And this is the
lists-
Republican Study Commission, which is just it's a group of Republicans within the Republican caucus who are a bit more conservative-leaning, who put forward an 11-point plan to rescue America, full of vague suggestions of things they believe in the event that the Republicans take the House and the Senate in
Our
22.
kids will say the Pledge of Allegiance, salute the flag, and learn that America is a great country, and choose the school that best fits them.
Okay.
Government will never again ask American citizens to disclose their race, ethnicity, or skin color on government forms. So he goes through all these different ones here, and will secure our border, finish building the wall, and name it after President Donald Trump.
Yeah.
My point is some of these are a little bit more theatrical.
Of course.
And some of these, I would personally say, okay, come on. Really? You want to name it up?
And it's even if you support that, really, defending life is number 9 on the list of 11.
But here's the thing that's amazing to me, John, is that and then number 11, we are Americans, not globalists. If I was Bill Kristol and I had some supposed history of being pro-life, I would probably go to that one on the border wall, and I would say, this is a great way for me to stick it to Donald Trump because his name's literally in the name of this.
Yeah. The benefits or lack of benefits of a wall, we leave to other programs. But, if you're an anti-Trump person and you want to go against, Trump aggrandizement, that's the thing to get, not the anodyne idea that we should protect unborn human life.
That's the incredible thing to me, is that he literally goes out of his way. It's not like Rick Scott did this entire plan that's just on the pro-life issue. There's 11 points here, one of which literally has President Trump's name in it. And
on a big, beautiful border wall that we're going to make Mexico pay for.
And instead, he, that's the thing that makes it even more shocking. It's like he's going out of his way to stick the shiv in all of his former pro-life allies and colleagues.
Right.
Do you support this, senators?
And maybe this is what's underlying it. The specter of passing a national abortion limitation law. All right. Because apparently conservatives are still hung up over the debates that were kind of resolved in 1937 about how to use the Interstate Commerce Clause. Okay, so one of the things that massively expanded federal power in this country was a series of Supreme Court decisions that started in 1937 where the Supreme Court had been blocking a bunch of FDR's New Deal things by saying, this goes beyond the scope of what Congress can regulate. And then in 1937, it was the switch in time that saved 9. The Supreme Court started okaying a lot of the things FDR wanted to do under an expansive notion of what constitutes interstate commerce. So the Constitution says Congress can regulate commerce between the states. They expanded wildly the notion of what constitutes commerce between the states in 1937. And some Republicans were very upset about this, disagreed with it at the time, have been disagreeing with it forever. And they're still holding on to this academic disagreement about, what is interstate commerce? Something that's been taken for granted in legislation after legislation since 1937, basically. So let me get this straight. If we have the opportunity with a Republican president, Republican Congress, if we get the opportunity to outlaw abortion through a piece of federal legislation, which, by the way, Democrats have tried to mandate legal abortion through federal legislation in the event that Roe is overturned. They
literally this year.
Literally less than a year ago, passed a bill in the House to try to do that. It didn't pass the Senate. We're going to get hung up over the niceties of interpreting the Constitution and whether or not the Interstate Commerce Clause applies to abortion, a medical practice that's practiced nationwide that has marketplace impacts if one state outlaws it versus another, as California is demonstrating. We'll talk about that in a second. That the federal government shouldn't regulate it? No. If Democrats are going to try to pass federal abortion legislation to keep it legal, Republicans in Congress need, at the very least, to do the same thing to outlaw it. All right, we need to make efforts to outlaw abortion at the federal level and at the state levels. All right, speaking of states, what is California doing? California passing legislation to get rid of out-of-pocket costs for abortion. We'll talk about it next on Right to Life Radio. All right. So, Jonathan, let's talk about SB 245. It appears that this is heading for final passage by Governor Newsom, and it's kind of a key component of the broader Democrat California plan to turn our state into a sanctuary state for the unborn, and I think increasing the argument that this is an interstate commerce issue. So,
Yes.
Jonathan, why don't you explain what SB 245 is and what it does?
So this is one of the abortion bills that is a holdover from last year. We've started to see a ton of new bills introduced in response to the Future of Abortion Council. But there was one bill by name and number that was called out in that Future of Abortion Council report, and that was SB 245. The reason is this essentially would say if you attended any of the hearings last year, I know my coworker Greg Burt and I attended some of them there in Sacramento, and you might have seen it last year. Essentially, this means that already the state of California has said, well, we think that it is, just awful that there might be some abortions that might not be covered by some insurance. So we're going to force every insurance plan in the state to cover abortion.
Number one. And then
number two, we're going to say, well, maybe you don't have insurance, so we'll try to cover it with emergency Medi-Cal or something. But then they've realized, well, there's this loophole where what if you have a abortion coverage, but you can't afford it? You have it covered, but you still have that dastardly copay or those deductibles or something. And John, I remember sitting in the hearing in Sacramento last year and listening to multiple people testify, and one young woman in particular. And I was torn between being nauseous and heartbroken and kind of furious because the way where she was talking about, it was just so inconvenient, and it was so awkward.
It was so inconvenient for me to get my abortion while I was at school.
I had to ask my boss for time off, and it was just really, really difficult that, he was wondering why I was needing to go to the doctor, and I was worried about having to drive and make these appointments, and on top of that, the cost of several $100s to end the life of my child.
It was like the biggest sob story that's not really a sob story in the sense of if you think abortion is basic medical care, like everyone has inconveniences going to get medical care. Like this is not like this is something unique. Like, people have to take time off from work for medical things. They have to drive to medical offices for appointments, etc. And what SB 245 specifically is going to do is eliminate all out-of-pocket costs for abortion. So for anyone who has any insurance, all of your out-of-pocket costs will magically go away. They magically disappear. No one else is going to have to shoulder those costs or anything in their premiums or anything. No. Yes. So basically what this bill will do is eliminate all out-of-pocket costs for anyone with insurance who's getting an abortion. And thus, naturally, the financial weight of that will fall on the shoulders of people who pay their premiums. So this is basically now there are a number of ways to approach this. One is, first of all, the reason why California has mandated that our state has to have Medi-Cal cover abortion, and this has been true in California since the 70s. The reason this California Supreme Court has mandated that the California Constitution requires that Medi-Cal cover abortion is because basically they say we have to respect a woman's right to choose, and we can't tip the scales in favor of one thing versus another. So if you cut off California state funding for abortion, but not for, childbirth costs, you're tipping the scales in favor of childbirth rather than abortion. You're coercing the choice. That's been the rationale. Now, that's an insane rationale on the part of the California state legislature that has no grounding, I would say, in the text of the California state constitution. But nonetheless, that has been the California Supreme Court's rationale. What is happening here, if not going the other way?
Yep.
We're basically going to say, for anyone with any health insurance coverage in California, you don't have to pay a dime for abortion. Meanwhile, there's still out-of-pocket costs associated with pregnancy and childbirth. Of course there are. Now, they might say, well, pregnancy and childbirth is a bit more involved of a thing than abortion is. Yeah, because you're actually, trying not to kill somebody and end a problem. But still, you're tipping the scales. You're making abortion free, effectively. And,
John, if I could make a very Jonathan Swiftian dark analogy here, a modest proposal.
Go for it.
As it were.
It's a radio show. Go for it.
One of the other major issues that the state of California is dealing with is the issue of homelessness.
Right.
And if the state of California decided, well, you know what, some of these private business owners, they're just really frustrated with all these homeless people on their property. So we've passed a law that is going to allow these private business owners to shoot the homeless people that are on their property.
Yeah.
Yeah, just clear them out.
Yeah, we'll pay for all their ammo.
Hey, we'll pay for your ammo because
pay for your guns.
Look, we don't want to put our finger on the scale of whether or not you should or not shoot them. Look, it's up to you. It's your property, your choice.
Yeah. But then we're also going to pay for, on top of it, the body removal.
Yes.
So
and say, well, besides, I mean, yes, it's true that we could provide housing and drug treatment services for people, but that's much more involved. And
right.
That's more expensive. I mean, wouldn't it be easier just to have a one and done solution to this?
Yeah. Well, exactly. So I mean, it's insane. It is genuinely insane. If you genuinely believe abortion is just healthcare, then treat it like normal healthcare. But no, they want to treat it as is this privilege, like the most important healthcare treatment of all forms of healthcare treatment, which frankly is not even healthcare treatment, because healthcare involves correcting something that's wrong with the body. It doesn't involve arresting a natural process, which is all abortion is. It's artificially ending a life. It's not, pregnancy is not an illness or a disease that is cured by abortion. Anyway, so that's the first thing, is just how insane this is in California. The second thing is the interstate commerce aspect of it. All right. As we said in the last segment, there are some people on the right who are more attached to academic arguments about the proper scope of the Interstate Commerce Clause, who care more about that than they do about, I don't know, ending the legalized killing of 800,000 children every year. And there are some people who would say, well, absolutely not. We shouldn't have a federal law banning abortion. It's wrong. Because the idea being, well, the Interstate Commerce Clause has been way over broadly interpreted since 1937. This is why the federal government has grown in so much power, and this should only be a thing that state governments should regulate. All right, make that argument. But let's understand this. California is positioning itself to be the magnet, basically to be the abortion haven, the abortion sanctuary state, the abortion magnet for every other state that's going to outlaw abortion after Roe v. Wade's overturned. God help us. Let's hope that happens. If Roe v. Wade's overturned and Texas outlaws abortion, California is trying to position itself to be able to take in people from Texas, have people from Texas fly out to California to have abortions here. I would say that abortion involves commerce between states, if that's what's happening. People are crossing state lines to come get abortions. Abortion's legalization in one state is impacting markets and patients and people in another state. Abortion being outlawed in one state is affecting abortion. I mean, look, if we're going to regulate, medical devices, drugs at the federal level, if we're going to be able to regulate the entirety of the healthcare system at the federal level, don't you think maybe abortion should be something that we could regulate at a federal level? I mean, we passed the bill to outlaw partial birth abortion. That was a federal piece of legislation that was passed. Republicans have time and again passed legislation at the federal level to outlaw, post-20-week abortion. Now's the time, and Republicans have gone along with interstate commerce clause bills, assuming, a lot of the conditions of 1937 that interstate commerce can regulate a vast swath of things that probably before 1937 nobody thought it could regulate. Now's the time we're going to get nitpicky and put on our, the original meaning of the Constitution, blah, 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 blah. Dude, I'm not saying the Constitution is a total free-for-all and everyone should read into it what they want, but guess what? The interpretation of things kind of changes a little bit over time. And the Constitution was not written by God Almighty himself. And guess what? Some aspects of the Constitution, not exactly self-interpretive.
And John, I also would argue that there are certain things that it is perhaps worth going to the mat over and pushing back on harder for certain things. Like, you could argue if you're like, okay, well, is it really true that the price of wheat and marijuana legalization and those types of interstate commerce things, are those things that libertarians, we should say, well, we really should go to the mat so that any individual can grow marijuana in their backyard?
Right.
I mean, I think you could talk about that and say, well, there's arguments on both sides, and should this be a federal issue or should marijuana be deregulated and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But that is whether or not some dude in Berkeley can get high by himself because he's got a plant in his backyard.
Yeah, which fundamentally pretty low-level priority for me.
This is literally talking about the lives and deaths of 1 million people every year.
Right. A little more important. A little bit more important.
And if you're going to trample on something, if you're going to say, well, what if we open the door to saying that the federal government could regulate abortion? I mean, what Pandora's box could we open?
Yeah.
Might I suggest that the Pandora's box is open, that abortion deregulation is the bad apple?
This is the bad outcome.
Yes.
This is it. We have it now. 800,000 people is dying every year legally. That's the worst.
What worse outcome are you envisioning?
That's the worst outcome of all possible outcomes is annual genocide. All right. So and that's the thing. Okay. We talked a little bit about why do people become Republicans? Why do people become Democrats? Usually it's because there are a couple of issues that they really agree with that party on. It's not like you have equal enthusiasm and equal agreement with every single plank of the Republican Party platform. If I identify as a Republican, it is first and foremost because of the abortion issue. Okay? That's why for me. How many people are so originalist down to their very bones that they're going to be like, nope, we're not going to outlaw abortion at the federal level because, I don't know how originalist I am if that's the price of it. And I'll just conclude. I'll conclude sort of by saying this. Basically, if Democrats are going to try to pass federal legislation to keep abortion legal, which they have done in the last year, they passed a law like that, basically to try to make the whole country Roe v. Wade overturn-proof by making abortion a question of federal law. If Democrats are going to try to do it, Republicans need to try to do it. That is a bare minimum necessity. We'll talk about that a little bit more after the break. This is Right to Life Radio on Power Talk. Right to Life Radio, thank you all again so much for tuning in. I want to very quickly acknowledge our 300 Club supporters, especially recent 300 Club supporters who've joined us since December. Jerry Coderniz, Michael Doherty, James Drewley, Laura Gurries, Gerald Logaluso, Ann Olson, Luann Towsley, Katie Ferris, Dr. Mike Habibi, Michael Troy, Joseph, and Gina Fry. Thank you all so much to all of you for your support. Okay, Jonathan, as we're closing out the show, the lessons I want us to learn today are we need to fight fire with fire when it comes to federal legislation. And I kind of want to emphasize this point to people again. So there's some people apparently on the right concerned about the idea of, well, if Roe v. Wade's overturned, meaning that you can pass legislation to limit abortion again, either at the state level or the federal level, would Republicans want to pass a national bill to outlaw abortion? That seems crazy. And people like Bill Kristol are asserting that like as if that would be a completely wild idea, even though it's like kind of, outlawing abortion is part of the Republican Party platform for the last 30 years. Here's the thing. Let me just reiterate this. Less than a year ago, Democrats in the House of Representatives passed a bill to mandate nationwide legal abortion. So the idea being, all right now abortion is legal nationwide because Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey mandate legal abortion as a provision of the Constitution. They assert that the Constitution mandates that abortion be legal. Okay? If they are overturned, then it's basically a free-for-all. Any state can regulate abortion however you want. So what Democrats wanted to do was, in the event that Roe is overturned, just pass a national law, pass a federal law, have Congress pass a federal law to mandate that abortion be legal all over the country, overriding any existing state law to the contrary. That's not just what Democrats want to do. That's what Democrats have already tried to do and succeeded in doing in the House anyway. Didn't pass the Senate, but only because of the filibuster rule in the Senate, which, as we know, is a tenuous situation in which 48 of the 50 Democrats support getting rid of the filibuster rule in the Senate if they're in power. So the idea that Republicans would not respond to this new situation by also pushing, when they come to power, for themselves to pass national abortion legislation. Let's outlaw abortion at a national level. Let's put abortion restrictions on all 50 states, regardless of what California decides they want to do, regardless of whoever. The idea that you wouldn't. It's like the definition of bringing a knife to a gunfight. It's like the definition of like, all right, well, for the sake of honor, we know that the enemy has, AK-47s and dug-in trenches, but let's have a cavalry charge. It's the definition of madness.
Yes.
As far as I can tell.
Unilateral disarmament.
Yeah, it's unilateral disarmament. So the idea, anyway, I just find it astonishing that Republicans aren't willing to respond to the changing circumstances. The Democrats are telling them, we've changed the rules of the game. We have to play the game. You play to win the game, in the words of Herm Edwards. All right, that'll do it for Right to Life Radio. We will see you next week on Power Talk.